Creating observable and measurable learning objectives is a critical step in developing your course. The tricky part is making sure your objectives can be observed and measured. People often fall into the trap of stating objectives like, by the end of this module, you will understand how a widget works. Well, understand isn't measurable because you can't see someone understanding something. You have to take it to the next level and describe what behavior a student can do to demonstrate what they understand. Restated as, by the end of this module, you will be able to identify the moving parts of a widget, document the role each part plays in a widget's function, and evaluate the effectiveness of a widget's components, clearly identifies what the learner can do to demonstrate what they understand. These learning objectives can all be observed or measured through various methods such as discussions, projects, research papers, and exams. Bloom's taxonomy is a tool learning professionals use to develop learning objectives. You will be using a revised Bloom's taxonomy verb chart to develop the learning objectives for each of your modules. Here's how it works. There are 6 levels in Bloom's taxonomy: remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. These are your starting point. Use them to clearly state what students need to be able to do as a result of the instruction. The cognitive level of the learning objectives should correspond to the cognitive level in Bloom's hierarchy. Remembering is the simplest, and creating is the most complex to achieve. For example, an introductory class on geography would start with the remembering level. Students would need to list all the states in the United States of America to demonstrate what they remember. An advanced class on geography would include the creating level, where students draw complex topographical maps to demonstrate what they remember. Bloom's understanding level may be confusing because we already explained that understand is not a measurable verb. The understanding level is different. It contains a list of active verbs that are observable and measurable. We use Bloom's taxonomy verb charts to find dynamic verbs that help ensure we can create observable and measurable learning objectives. Let's run through an example of building measurable learning objectives. Our course is Introduction to Figure Drawing. The Bloom's level needs to be appropriate to the complexity of this introductory course. Let's choose Remember and Understand for our first module, which is Drawing Tools and Materials. Let's check the Bloom's taxonomy verb chart for verbs that'll work. Under Remembering, we have Identify and Describe. These are perfect. Our first learning objective will be identify and describe at least 5 materials and tools used in figure drawing. So how do we measure this objective? We create an assignment for students to write an essay on gathering what they need to build a toolkit for drawing. That wasn't so hard, was it? Let's make our second learning objective. All right, let's look at the verbs for our second Bloom's level, understanding. Oh, I like this. Let's use compare and contrast. Our second learning objective will be compare and contrast the differences between graphite pencils, charcoal pencils, and pastels. How do we measure this objective? We create a discussion question for students to compare and contrast these tools. So we've talked about learning objectives and how to measure them, but there's one more thing to help ensure learning objectives are achievable: learning activities. The learning activities are how the learner gains the knowledge to meet the learning objective. Some effective learning activities include reading assignments, conducting research, and watching the instructor lecture videos. Providing the right input sets the learner up for success. Remember that learning activities are not the same as learning objectives, so don't confuse the two. Learning objectives are listed separately from the learning activities on the About page of each of your modules. They describe what a learner can do after completing the module. Learning activities are the steps students need to take during the module to complete the instruction. To recap, the revised Bloom's taxonomy verb chart will help you create observable and measurable learning objectives for all of your course modules. You must provide learning activities for the learner to obtain the information necessary to achieve the learning objectives and create assignments that allow students to demonstrate proficiency in a measurable way. Learning objectives can be challenging to write, even for experienced faculty, so go easy on yourself if you find you're struggling. Don't forget to reach out to your workshop facilitators and program directors if you need any help. Post your learning objectives in the discussion for this module if you want suggestions from your peers, and feel free to ask questions and ask for help.